Going on the men's side here, ATP Montreal. Someone again was asking me today if Rafa Nadal can win this tournament. I say that at 2.8, it's a no play for me. I don't think that you can put your money on Rafa Nadal. Doesn't matter how good he is on the outright on this type of surface, because we're not talking about clay. Yes, if we were talking about clay, I will put my hand on fire that he would win at 2.8. Great value on that. Without Djokovic being here, without Federer being here, so he is alone. Rafa Nadal 2.8, and after that, huge drop. Alexander Zverev 10, Tsitsipas 13, Dominic Thiem 11, Kei Nishikori 13, and so on. James, what do you have for this outright market? I'm curious. Seems to you like a good thing, like a good player to back at 17 after coming back from that superb win last week against Medvedev in the final?
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at Rafa's record in the hardcore and Masters, it's actually quite different to his record in the general hardcore event. And I think it's tricky. This event has traditionally been won by one of the big four pretty much every year, of course, like most of the Masters. So I mean, I wouldn't be betting on Nadal at 2-1, but I doubt that he's actually that much too short. I think he played well at Wimbledon, and I think Wimbledon played more like a hardcore event. I think he's also, I would assume, going to come into this, given the adjustments that I saw at Wimbledon, he's going to come into this a little bit better prepared for the hard courts. So I'm not jumping to oppose him, but I think, as always, I'm happy to take some outsiders here. The main reason, actually, that I'm happy to take outsiders is the other half of the draw, because I think the top half with Rafa in it, it's kind of, I found it difficult at least to find that many players who I was comfortable betting on. There are certain players, for example, like Bautista Agut, who I think he was 40s at the start of the week. I very much considered him. I saw Sean Calvert actually tipped him outright as well. But my big problem with that is that he has got a very, very poor record against Rafa. And I think both psychologically and in terms of his game style, he would struggle in that kind of matchup. And same of most people that I could pick in that bottom half. Someone like Monfils, again, he looked quite good, to be honest, overall yesterday against Polanski, despite the fact that he managed to blow quite a considerable lead in the first set and made it harder for himself. Someone like Nishikori, again, just I would not be expecting him, the form I've seen of him, to be winning that. So I looked in the bottom half, and for me, that's because there are lots of very, very obviously opposable players in this bottom half. You have Zverev, Raonic, Kachanov, Cilic, Thiem, Isner, Coric. They're all players who are being priced up again on kind of old form, who don't really seem to be playing well or don't seem to play that well in general on the hard court Masters. So I would be taking some options down there. I think some of the options we have would be Stan the Man, Wawrinka, Felix Auger-Aliassime, Basilashvili, Struff, Edmund, Shapovalov. I think they're all potential options. Again, predominantly to try and take advantage of one of those top seeds who I think is looking vulnerable. I personally decided to go for Basilashvili. I also had Berrettini as well before we realized he was injured. Looks like he's done his leg in. But for me, Basil fits the bill in several ways. Probably the most important thing with Basil is actually, I remember last year when he won Hamburg, he then went on to win Beijing. And he was given he was given some help there. Del Potro in the final of Beijing was certainly not his best. But we saw Basil play very hot for a few weeks in the year. And that came off the back of probably not playing that particularly well leading up to that. And then he played himself into form in Hamburg. And that followed through to Beijing. So, of course, this is a very similar situation here. It's a bigger tournament. It's a Masters rather than a 500. But he has the firepower to do it. And he has the kind of draw where I could totally see him playing his way through. He has Alex Zverev is the main threat in his quarter, who, of course, he beat last week in Hamburg. Not last week, sorry. He beat recently in Hamburg. And then going from there, he would have Kachanov or Ranic, both of whom, again, I'm yet to see any decent form this year, really. I mean, they've had some decent matches, but they've not been able to string anything together. And then once you get past that, he would have, or the seeded player would be Team in the semi-final. And I mean, anyone who's seen Team playing on these faster hard courts, this is not a particularly fast hard court, but it's not a slow hard court. They'll know that Team is generally opposable in these situations. He did manage to win Indian Wells, which was a surprise. But of course, that's one of the highest bouncing, slowest hard court events there is. So it kind of makes some sense for him to do well there. He's not going to tend to replicate that form across most hard court events. So yeah, I think he's probably very nicely positioned if he can play well to have a deep run this week.
What do you guys say about Medvedev here? Obviously, he might face Kyrgios for the second time in 4 days. He lost the final in Washington last 2 days ago. And now he will play in the second round directly because he's number 8 in the world right now. So he will play against his number 8 seeded right now. So he will play against Kyrgios or Kyle Edmund here. I watched the final in Washington. He basically played very good the entire first set. He lost 1 ball on his serve, 1 point on his service before the tie break. He managed to win 2 mini breaks in the tie breaks. He was leading 4-1, and something happened. Again, what the fuck happened? I don't know. I really don't understand this kind of players. I really don't understand how it's possible to play so good and, I don't know, a click to happen and boom, to lose everything. What is happening, Snize?
So yeah, first of all, James broke down the draw very well there. Medvedev, I think he was the model of consistency last week. He had been struggling a bit with his form since Barcelona, really, but he really showed that he belongs in the top 10. Very difficult guy to break down. Fantastic defense, fantastic serve, great movement for a guy his size, good at the net. So yeah, he played brilliantly all week, I think. The thing is, when you face Nick Kyrgios, and a Nick Kyrgios that cares about playing tennis, it's pretty tough to win because he is, in my book, he has one of the absolute elite, one of the best serves in the world. I would say top 5, top 3 best serves in the world when he's on fire. And his serve was clicking. It was extremely difficult for Medvedev to get a foot in on return games. And I think Kyrgios is the type of player that can get into a player's head. He does, really unorthodox stuff on the court. He does the tweeners. He talks to himself a lot, talks to the ref, talks to the crowd. And Medvedev
he was
is
high-fiving
a guy
the crowd,
who I think can be affected by that. He was when they faced earlier this year in Rome. Kyrgios' antics really got to him in a 3-set loss there. So there could be some of that, but I think it was just mostly down to just really small margins, as always with 2 big servers in a tiebreak, and Kyrgios just played extremely well. So I wouldn't take too much and put too much blame on Medvedev for that final loss, and put it more down to Kyrgios playing well. And Medvedev is the type of guy that can go deep.
I remember Jeff Sackman from Tennis Abstract did an analysis of Kyrgios and showed that he's one of the few players who has actually consistently managed to play a higher level of tennis every single time, but a very high percentage of the time that he's needed to in these key moments. So it's like when he runs hot, as you say, Snize, it's just very, very hard to beat him. And I think that happened again when Medvedev went the double break up in the tiebreak. It was a really, really tricky situation from Kyrgios' perspective, but he just kept going. He kept playing his bizarre style of tennis, and yeah, it played off.
And he can bring also your sneakers if you want. He brought to Tsitsipas his sneakers when he needed the most. Nick Kyrgios, a player whom our friend and a very good colleague from Odds Market, Adam Booth Lockyer on Twitter hates. So don't talk about don't talk nice about Nick Kyrgios, because Adam will get angry here on the live chat and he will start swearing, and I will put him on hold for 180 seconds. So yeah, go Snize, please.
So Medvedev was a guy that I looked at this week. Actually didn't go ahead and like anything enough to put in an outright bet for this tournament, I should go ahead and say. But Medvedev was one of the guys I looked at. He has the physical ability to be able to go deep in back-to-back events, and that's something that his probable second-round opponent, Nick Kyrgios, lacks, both mentally and physically. He's not in good of enough shape to actually contend deep into back-to-back tournaments, and who knows where he'll be mentally after winning the title. After winning his title in Acapulco, beating Nadal, he went off and just lost a couple of matches for an extended amount of time there. They had a pretty interesting journey, I should say. He somehow managed to get Daniil Medvedev and Stefanos Tsitsipas on the same plane, and those guys loathe each other. They absolutely despise each other because they hate each other. So very interesting flight trip there for Nick Kyrgios and the guys. So who knows, maybe some new friendships there. But yeah, Medvedev, I think, can go deep here and probably be where I'll be looking to place an outright. Nadal is the favorite, and I think it'll be very tough to beat him if he comes here and plays his best tennis. But as you guys said, no value there. So Medvedev will stay away from me. I do have some bets on the other markets, though. I've gone particularly and played the quarters, so I'll break down.
I was just going to say,
those
sorry.
instead.
So the other point about the City Open, for me at least, is of course they're playing in very hot, unpleasant conditions there. So I think I completely agree with you. I think from watching how Medvedev played, I was very keen to get involved in some way. But I just find it really, really difficult. The idea of backing that week up with another deep week, very physically hard. So yeah, I was with you on that one. Had the same feelings, but it's very hard to pull the trigger.
Yeah. So actually, ultimately stayed off there. So I went with the quarters instead. So if you look at quarter two, I went ahead and looked at. So the guys that spearhead quarter two are Stefanos Tsitsipas. We have Gael Monfils, Roberto Bautista Agut, and Kei Nishikori. And I went ahead and played Kei Nishikori to win that quarter on Sunday at 3.6. He's often knocked the Japanese for disappearing when faced up against the elite of the elite names, has a very poor record against the big three, usually gets absolutely obliterated and people make jokes about it. But he's often extremely consistent and often consistent enough to be the best of the rest, so to speak. It is a rarity for this smooth player to not reach a quarterfinal at events, and he's done that in all three slams this year. His hardcourt numbers are elite and well within the top 10 in most categories, and the 29-year-old, for once, which is a big thing for me, he did not struggle against, on paper, inferior opposition at Wimbledon, because usually what you get with Nishikori, he gets faced up with some mug, somehow, some way gets dragged to 5 sets, couple matches in a row, and then he turns up gassed in the quarterfinals against whomever of the big three and gets absolutely washed. But he didn't do that, and played well versus Federer before losing in the quarterfinal. So the big threat in this quarter, I don't think Tsitsipas is able to back up his week in Washington. I think he still has a few holes he needs to cover in his game. He looked sloppy at sections of those matches, a lot of unforced errors, uncanny unforced errors that you don't really want to see there. So the big threat for me is Roberto Bautista Agut, but Kei has a 4-1 winning record on him head-to-head, and I think he is the best bet to win that quarter. Moving on there to quarter three, I have gone with the Stanimal. Bet him, obviously, on Sunday as well.
The Stanimal.
At 8 to win his quarter three. Yeah, Wawrinka has looked to rediscover his pre-knee injury form for a long time, and he's found it in bursts this season. He has had a few matches where he's looked brilliant and then he's gone off the boil again. But I think he's playing very well right now. And the quarter spearheaded by Zverev, with all of the legal issues right now surrounding him and clearly affecting him on and off the court and his play this season. We have Raonic, who's been woeful and has a woeful record here at Canada at home, I should mention as well. And Khachanov, who struggled with racket changes and forms and inconsistency all season. I think this quarter looks there for the taking for Wawrinka, so I went with him there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't like the fact that Adam left before I placed my bet against him. Right now, he's going with Nick Kyrgios, and I'm going with Kyle Edmund. As you guys mentioned, and I will back your words 100% here, Nick Kyrgios, after such a win, I think that he partied, he got drunk a little bit, he's not in the mood for a second deep run in a tournament. I don't know, somehow I think that he will manage to lose. Kyle Edmund is not a bad player either, so if he's at his best, I think that he can beat Nick Kyrgios, who I don't think that he will have. He will be in a great mood to participate and to have a deep run in this tournament. So going with Kyle Edmund against Adam there. Going on the matches, we have many matches going on. Also now, also later on, but also tomorrow. Let's start with if you have any in play. Schwartzman losing against Cecchinato right now. Schwartzman live at 1.7. Should we take him now? I think that this is a correct bet. No, he's dropping now at 1.6. Do you guys think that we should pull the trigger on Schwartzman here?
Yeah, I think you should go ahead and bet Schwartzman. He's obviously coming from the Los Cabos title in Mexico, a bit of a short turnaround here. But Cecchinato is absolutely woeful right now. I think he's lost something like 11 out of 10 out of 11 matches. He's in woeful form. He's lost a ton of matches, not even on his preferred surface of clay. He's been able to win matches recently. He hits the ball with a lot of topspin and is generally pretty weak on faster surfaces. So this is definitely not a tournament that should suit him. So if Schwartzman can get over potential jet lag and a bit of tiredness in his legs from the Los Cabos run, he should turn this around. Obviously, I haven't watched the match, but this is a bet I would make purely based on a fade of Cecchinato there.
I would want to be watching it because the only thing for me is there's a couple of difficult things to pin down. I think Snize is absolutely right that Cecchinato hasn't been great, but when he's playing well, he is very dangerous. So the only problem I would have is if Schwartzman is showing quite a lot of fatigue, he's showing that he's not actually feeling very good for this, and Cechinato's honing in, because of course, if you have a bad run for a long time, a lot of people know eventually you'll have a good match, and often that can make you feel good as you're playing it and you can play into it. So I just want to be watching it to make sure that it is just one of those things where Schwartzman's missed a few too many shots, but he looks fine. And yeah, I would definitely, he actually has, I think he's won all 16 of his matches priced under 1.5 on hard courts, Schwartzman. So yeah, I wouldn't be expecting this to break the trend generally.
He just lost the first set, Schwartzman 6-3 right now, but he went. He was better in the first serve percentage, 72 to 65% there. On the first serve points won, he was bad, only 57%. Second serve points won, again very bad, 55%. Break points saved, 83%. So Cecchinato had 6 break points, and the Schwartzman saved 5 of them, but without winning any break point there. So Cecchinato managed to impose his serve really easy against Schwartzman. Later on, we have Hurkacz versus Taylor Fritz, Bjorn Čorić versus Gojovcik. And also at night, European time, Basilashvili against Struff, Kyrgios versus Edmund, Nori versus Alexander Zverev, and tomorrow very interesting matches, Garin versus Isner, Richard Gasquet, who won his match against his fellow countryman Benoit Paire to upset Snize there. He was very upset after this. I'm sure he was, because he was with Benoit Paire to win that. Monfils against I think that Monfils should really win this match in straight sets against a player. I don't know many things about this player. Ivashka 125 double ATP there. Karen Kachanov versus Stan Wawrinka, and after that, obviously, we have Nadal versus Evans, Fonini, and Shapovalov playing Shapovalov versus Dominic Thiem. Interesting matches. James, do you have some favorite bets for this day and tomorrow?
Yeah, so I think, so going through the matches you just said there, I think probably the most obvious one to focus on for me, as again, doing the same kind of thing we did in both of the last two shows, opposing Alex Zverev in some way. Now, I'm less keen on it this week than I have been recently, because I have an instinct that he'll actually play okay here. I feel like these courts suit him quite well. But I still think Norrie's too long. You can get him at 3.75. And my feeling is these two met earlier in the year in Acapulco, and Norrie lost that, I think it was 7-6, 6-3. And it was a relatively competitive match. Norrie just couldn't really get that extra push, and Alex served pretty well. I remember because I backed Alex to love at the time, and I remember watching it thinking that he was doing just about enough to bring that through. And so there are two bets that I think make some sense in that one. The first one, the obvious one, being to just back Norrie at 3.75. I would not expect him to win, but I would expect that price to look too long. I don't think 3.75 is an accurate price. I would say closer to 3.25, maybe 3.4 would be my guess. And then the second bet, the one that I actually like more in a way, is the first set tiebreak at 5.2. And that's purely a price play, in the sense that it's happened. If you look at what Zverev tends to do on the hard courts, especially the Masters, he tends to win his matches when he's a fairly short favorite, but he does regularly go to tie breaks. He regularly has fairly tight sets, and we can get 5 with Betfair or 5.2 with Unibet, which to me are, I think, pretty clearly too long. I think the next best price that I could see was closer to 4, which is, more like what I would say it should be. Because I can see that coming in many ways. I can see Norrie starting well, having had a couple of matches already, or having had a match already here. He might be more warmed up than Alex. I could also see Alex kind of just not playing that well, as he has most of the year, and just having quite a competitive set. And it's not the most tie-breaky of tournaments, but it's certainly enough for me to think 5 or 5.2 is too long. So I think for me, from that match, either the first set tiebreak or the win on Norrie makes some sense. If you wanted to go for a quote-unquote safer bet, or a shorter odds bet for an accumulator or something along those lines, I was surprised to see Fognini at 1.72 against Paul. Didn't really expect him. 1.67 with Pinnacle. I think if you look at his record again on the hard courts, he tends to do a lot better than people expect. I would not generally be wanting to bet on him against the better players here, because I think he'll struggle motivation-wise at this part of the year. But I think it's a little bit insulting against a player like Paul, who has a lot of potential, but he hasn't really shown it consistently at all yet. I would definitely expect Fognini to come through that, and I was expecting something more like 1.5. So anything close to 1.66, 1.7 is quite an easy bet for me, I think.
Great value bets there from James. Snize, do you have something on the matches happening now, today, or tomorrow?
Yeah, I have a few bets for today, and I have also a few bets for tomorrow. So starting with the bets that go off today, should start, I'm not sure exactly when, but we have a matchup between Bjorna Coric and Petr Gojovcik here, and I've gone with the over 2.5 sets at 2.62 with Bet365. Bjorna Coric obviously hasn't played for a while now. He withdrew from Halle with a back injury, came back in Umag, lost in straight sets to Salvatore The Wall Caruso. Didn't look all too great there. So it's a bit tricky there to guess where Čorić's fitness is at. But I would assume he is reasonably healthy and fit enough to compete here. Peter Gojovcik obviously hasn't had great results at all, but suddenly came to life last week in Washington, where he had a dream run to the semifinals as a qualifier, playing extremely well there. And he hits a very flat ball, can target the corners well, and when he's confident on his game, he's definitely a challenge for most players. So I definitely think he can continue with this good form that he's in right now and take a set off Čorić. I do think that Čorić, if he is fit, should be too much for him. And Čorić also has a tendency to play a lot of 3-set matches. I think it's 16 out of his 26 matches in the best of 3 format that have gone the distance. So Čorić is usually an over machine. A lot of his matches do tend to go 3 sets. So I'm expecting a reasonably fit Čorić to show up, but Gojovcik in good form should give him a stern challenge, and 3 sets there is a good price. Moving on to the night match, I'm going to go head-to-head with Alex. I heard you like Kyle Edmund in the night match there versus Nick Kyrgios. And I would have to disagree. And here's why. Obviously, now that Nick Kyrgios has won a title, people are expecting him to basically non-show and just lie down and die here. But I don't think necessarily that is the case. When Nick Kyrgios gets into a spell where he's interested in playing tennis, it can definitely keep up. He's, let's just get that out of the way, a much better player than Kyle Edmund is. And the problem I have with Kyle Edmund is that he tends to retract into a little shell when he plays better players. He can suddenly lose confidence in himself, has a good serve, has a great forehand, but when he lacks confidence, he can usually lose matches. He lost to Peter Gojovcik, obviously, in Washington. Kyrgios, even when not interested in playing tennis, obviously has a top 5 serve. That will be extremely difficult for Edmund to break. I think this will be a serve-dominated matchup. And so even if Kyrgios doesn't put in all too much of effort, I still think that this price is a bit insulting. He's clearly the better player, and this price is only based on really him not giving a shit in this match. If Kyrgios shows up at a reasonable level here, he's going to win this match. So purely off a price, I'm going to have to go with Kyrgios here. He should not be an underdog to Kyle Edmund.
I disagree with both of you guys. I think you're both wrong because I have no idea what's going to happen here at all.
With this match. Tell us.
Oh dear.
That will be the first, the both of them to get suspended. You did that. You did that. Nobody will go further.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is Kyrgios, so obviously proceed with extreme caution, as you never quite know what to get out of the man. But I definitely like the price here a bit too much to stay away. So Kyrgios it is. Moving on to tomorrow, I focused on 2 matches. We've got Stan Wawrinka versus Karen Khachanov. And in this match, I've gone with Wawrinka to win. I got him at 1.71. He looked impressive in dispatching, obviously, the struggling Grigor Dimitrov in straight sets, but he dominated on serve and he played shrewdly on return. He blocked back a lot of balls in play, was able to get ahead and dominate the rallies. And he'll face Karen Khachanov, who we talked a little bit about. He hasn't been able to put together a consistent year. He's made multiple racket changes, looked a bit lost out on court at parts of this season. So with the Russians' inconsistency and Stan playing pretty well at the moment, in a match of big ball strikers, I definitely like the Swiss to proceed there. And in the other match, we have Denis Shapovalov, I think you pronounce it, versus Dominic Thiem.
Yes.
And the home player here, home hope, Denis Shapovalov, he's been largely woeful the entire year, really. But Montreal may yet bring the best out of the young Canadian. Might be some Canadian magic sprinkled there. It was the scene of his breakthrough back in 2017, where he beat Juan Martín del Potro and Rafael Nadal en route to the semifinals as an 18-year-old here. He looked very poised under pressure and played extremely well, I would say, in his win over Herbert. He has some stunning winners and points played in that match that was really impressive to me. And as James has talked about, Thiem is definitely a player we want to oppose. He's very vulnerable here. The Austrian has yet to play on hard court this swing. He opted instead to play 2 clay court tournaments, finally lifting the Kitzbühel crown at home in Austria, which he has long been searching for. He has a bad record here in both Rogers Cup matches, both in Montreal and Toronto. He's never made it past round 2, and he now has to switch surfaces and continents on a short turnover to boot. So I definitely like the home hope here. I got him at 240. When he's confident, he should be a good matchup, and I think he prevails here.